Good morning. My name is Susan Olson. I'm the Director of Legislative Services for the Women's Defense League, and I'm here today on Thursday, the 12th of February, to sit in and watch the Senate as they go through their bills on the consent and regular calendar. Of interest, of course, is Senate Bill 116, Constitutional Carry. We have a great deal of we believe support for this bill within the Republican caucus. We also believe that there are a number of Democrat senators who, because of their districts, like Senator Woodburn or Senator Hosmer, who live in the North Country and have great hunters and Second Amendment supporters in their districts, that we believe that we may have an opportunity with a couple of Democrat senators to vote principle over party and support Senate Bill 116. So we've handed out some additional information for senators. We're here to sit through the process, and I'm hopeful for a resounding vote on ought to pass. As soon as the vote comes in and we get a chance to take a break, I'll be back on the bill and I'll let you know what happens.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The New York Judiciary, to which was referred Senate Bill 116 FM, an act repealing the license requirement for carrying a concealed pistol or revolver. Having considered the state, the committee recommends that the bill is not passed by a vote of 3 to 1. Senator Carson to the committee.
Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move ought to pass on Senate Bill 116. This bill, if passed, will create modest changes for New Hampshire's gun owners. First, it increases the length of time for which a license to carry a pistol or revolver is valid. It allows a person to carry a loaded, concealed pistol or revolver without a license unless such person is otherwise prohibited by New Hampshire statute. It also requires the Director of the Division of State Police to negotiate and enter into agreements with other jurisdictions to recognize in those jurisdictions the validity of the license to carry issued in this state. And finally, it repeals the requirement to obtain a license to carry a concealed pistol or revolver. Mr. President, the committee held a very long public hearing on this bill and heard from many New Hampshire citizens who spoke in overwhelming support of the bill. Current law allows any citizen who can legally own or possess a firearm to carry it openly, either loaded or unloaded, anywhere in the state, not prohibited by state or federal law. This changes when a person puts on an outer garment. This bill recognizes that the simple act of putting on a coat should not require a permit issued by the state. A number of women who attended the public hearing spoke about the need for this bill to pass for self-defense reasons. A woman who was a victim of domestic violence and who wants to protect herself would have to wait up to 14 days to get a concealed carry permit under current law. The committee heard testimony that the best response time to a call for help is 5 minutes in a larger city or town, and in a rural area, that time is much longer. One woman testified that she carries a weapon because she cannot carry a pump. This bill also keeps intact the procedure for obtaining a permit to conceal carry, especially for those who wish to participate in reciprocal concealed carry permit agreements with 22 other states. This bill does not expand the number of people who are legally entitled to carry guns in our state, nor does it expand the number of guns already legally recognized. If this bill were to become law, New Hampshire would join 5 other states in adopting the constitutional right to carry that respects the right of those legally entitled to carry a concealed gun without a permit. Please join with the majority of the Judiciary Committee in voting ought to pass on Senate Bill 116. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Carson. The bill is now on second reading. Is there any further discussion? Senator Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I oppose Senate Bill 116 because it repeals the very common sense requirement that a gun owner obtain a license if she wants to conceal her gun when carrying it around. This issue has been around for a while. It came up in 2004 and a few senators in this chamber, serving in this chamber today, were there for that vote. The senator from District 23 sponsored the bill and voted for it. And Mr. President, you and the senator from District 20 voted to keep the license requirement. There was also an impassioned speech from then Senator Gatsas that day, in which he summarized with the statement, quote, "I just think this has to do with common sense," and I agree. It came up again with 3 House bills when Mr. O'Brien was Speaker over at the House, and the House passed 2 of those bills, HB 330 and House Bill 536. But the Senate referred House Bill 330 to interim study on a voice vote. But on a roll call vote on HB 536, 8 of the senators serving in this chamber today, both Republican and Democrat, voted to table the bill. On both bills, common sense prevailed here in the Senate. There was another House bill in that session as well, HB 1318, that sought to do what SB 116 does today. But the House Criminal Justice Committee recommended ITL, stating, quote, "The committee felt this would create more problems than intended. This would create more problems with drugs, addictions, greed, gang violence, domestic violence, along with road rage," end quote. The House tabled the bill where it died. Again, common sense was allowed to prevail. And so here we are again, discussing the same issue, the same, I think, very simple issue. Do we or do we not believe that the modest license screening that our local police chiefs conduct is a common sense way to make sure that those they know who present a clear and present danger to their local community cannot hide their gun from plain view when they're out in public? To that question, I think everyone knows the common sense answer. It's common sense because we know that carrying a loaded concealed handgun increases the chances that a minor confrontation can escalate and turn lethal in a very distinct way that open carry does not. A study published in the Journal of Criminal Law and Criminology found that gun homicide rates increased, quote, on average by 4.5 per 100,000 persons, end quote, following the enactment of more permissive concealed carry laws. The Violence Policy Center found that after a few years that these lax laws were in place, there were increasingly more and more killings by concealed handgun permit holders. We now know that concealed handgun permit holders are killing people in road rage incidents, arguments over parking spaces, and domestic disputes. The incidents that the center documents graphically demonstrates how the presence of a handgun, a concealed handgun, escalates a simple argument into a homicide. And that's why we here in New Hampshire have applied common sense and treated open carry and concealed carry very differently since 1923, when the concealed carry permit license requirement was enacted. Because carrying a concealed handgun increases the chances that a simple confrontation can turn into something deadly. Let me give you an example. If I approach someone who just stole my parking space and I see that he's wearing a gun, open carry, I'm going to approach him much differently than if I don't see a gun. If I don't see a gun, or if I do see a gun, I'm probably not going to stand up for myself. I'm going to let him out of the parking place. But if I don't see a gun, then I might feel bold enough to go up and start a confrontation, or stand up for myself, saying, I've been waiting for that parking space. But if it turns out that he has a concealed pistol, a history of violence that's not bad enough to prohibit him from having the gun, but still bad enough that the police chief would have seen the threat and denied him the license, and the guy gets angry that I'm standing up to him, that simple confrontation could cost me my life and my 2 girls their father. So let's stick with the common sense approach that we've had here in New Hampshire for almost 100 years. Well, A, don't try to take a parking place from an open armed person, and don't repeal the safeguard that our predecessors enacted almost 100 years ago. Each year, local law enforcement, like Chiefs Bartlett and Goldstein here in the gallery today, issue thousands of these licenses. The senator from District 20, who's not here today, told me yesterday that Manchester grants 3,000 of these licenses a year. The Department of Safety, it says in the fiscal note, issues almost 10,000 non-resident licenses a year. What does this tell us? It tells us that pretty much anyone who wants one of these licenses gets one. But the police chiefs do serve their function and deny a few of these licenses every year as well. But in most cases, because the applicant has a serious criminal history or a serious mental illness, or in the case of, Chief Bartlett, a history of threatening the life of a police officer. And it just may be that the one denied license that the police chief denies could be the gun owner. The denied license could save my life or your life or the lives of my children. And understandably, that's why law enforcement officials from across New Hampshire oppose this bill. In fact, the law enforcement officers that testified at the hearing called SB116 a much more radical bill than they've ever seen before. The Police Chiefs Association and state troopers testified at the hearing, and the Sheriff's Association sent a letter opposing SB116. Excuse me. Chiefs Bartlett and Goldstein are here as well today because they oppose this bill. A little bit of research I did showed that almost every major law enforcement organization, including the International Brotherhood of Police Officers and the International Association of Chiefs of Police, thinks that law enforcement should have the discretion that our current law gives on carrying of a concealed handgun in public. And Mr. President, I trust law enforcement. I trust that law enforcement like Chief Bartlett and Chief Goldstein don't go around abusing their authority in denying these licenses. And in those cases in which an applicant believes that her local police chief has wrongfully denied her a license, she has the right to appeal that decision. If she wins, she gets her attorney's fees and costs paid by, I think, the police chief himself. Is that correct? So police chiefs, being on the financial hook, are going to be denying these willy-nilly. I trust law enforcement to make the right decisions because in most of our towns, the police chief probably knows everybody or just about everybody. He knows who it is that people should steer clear of and those who don't pose a threat to public safety. I trust that law enforcement makes the right decisions because they use their common sense. SB116 is a solution searching for a problem. New Hampshire's current licensing process is simple and straightforward, and sometimes licenses can be obtained sometimes in just a matter of minutes. The current process preserves our citizens' rights while respecting concerns for public safety, in particular the safety of law enforcement officers who put themselves at risk every day to protect us. It is essential, colleagues, that we vote today to protect the rights of our citizens while at the same time protecting the lives of our citizens. And I believe that our current law does just that. I believe, and law enforcement believes, that SB 116 does neither of these things. So I ask, once again, here in the Senate, let common sense prevail. Please vote down SB 116. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pierce. Senator Waters for a question?
Yes, Mr. President, question for the senator from District 5.
Yes.
Senator Pierce, will you take the question?
Yes. Oh, yes, yes.
And thank you for taking my question, Senator. Would it confirm what you've said about trusting law enforcement and the process the chiefs have in place to hear that from District 4, the police chiefs report that maybe 1, 2, or at most 3 out of 100 of these are denied for cases of individuals with severe mental illness or known histories of violence, and that even one chief of police has gone so far as to help applicants get previous felonies annulled so they could then get this permit?
I would believe that, and because I think the local police chiefs are also pro Second Amendment rights, and they want to facilitate that where they can, but when they see a safety concern, they act as they should. So I
Thank
agree
you.
with that. Thank you.
Senator Clark, question of?
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask a question of Senator Pierce.
Sure.
Thank you. In following up on Senator Waters' comments, would you believe that in speaking directly with every police chief in the 7 communities that I represent, as Senator from District 21, every one of them are against repealing the concealed weapon permit? In fact, the comment I've heard over and over again is, that's crazy. Citing its importance in protecting the safety of their citizens and their communities, and at the same time acknowledging and supporting that everyone has the right to open carry. If they believe that this permanent requirement was essential to make sure that in those rare instances when an individual was really unqualified to be carrying a concealed weapon, that they retain the ability for that screening mechanism.
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. You were a bit more thorough than I was. I have 9 communities. I contacted 5 of my police chiefs. They all supported or opposed this bill as well. So yes, I would believe your statement. Thank you.
Senator Carson, a question?
Senator Pierce.
Senator
Yes.
Pierce?
Thank you for taking my question,
Sure.
Senator Pierce. I have a few questions, and I'm hoping the Senate President and you will indulge me in being able to ask those questions. First of all, thank you for the history lesson. We do have a number of bills that come in all the time, and in my opinion, it's just an indication that this issue is alive and well in the state of New Hampshire. But would you agree that every bill gets filed, though the subject matter might be the same, the devil is always in the details? And that could account for why people that are sitting here in this chamber might have voted against bills that have the same subject, but because they had difficulty with the details.
Yes, absolutely. That could be true, but I will echo the statement of the law enforcement officials that testified at the hearing in which you were there, in saying that SB116 is even more radical than the bills that they saw before. So yes, the devil is in the details, and I think the police chiefs see that.
Further question?
Thank you, Mr. President. You had mentioned problems and some crime statistics, but is it not true that our neighbor to the west, Vermont, who has legislation very similar to this, they are a constitutional carry state, is the safest state in the nation?
I did my research, so thank you for asking me that question. Yes, Vermont is the safest state in the nation when you're looking at the statistic about the number of violent crimes per 100,000. And Vermont clocks in at 114.9 violent crimes per 100,000 population. But Senator, we're not just talking today about violent crimes, we're talking about repealing the protection we have against gun violence. So if you want to compare states on the issue that's before us, we have to talk about how safe or unsafe a state is when it comes to gun violence. In the 5 states with the highest per capita gun death rates were Louisiana, Mississippi, Alaska, Wyoming, and Montana. 2 of those, Alaska and Wyoming, have repealed the license requirement for carrying a concealed gun, just like SB116 would have us do. Now look at the other end of the spectrum. The 10 safest states, when looking at per capita gun deaths, were Rhode Island, Hawaii, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Vermont was nowhere near New Hampshire, where New Hampshire is in addressing gun violence. In fact, according to the study, Vermont had the 19th highest per capita gun death rate in the country. And I have the citation if you'd like it.
Thank you. May I follow up, Mr. President?
Further question?
Thank you very much. Those are some very interesting statistics, Senator, but do you know if the individuals that are cited in these studies were legally or illegally carrying a weapon and using a weapon? Is that accounted for in those studies?
I don't know the answer to that. I think they were basing their data on data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control.
Thank you. May I follow up, Mr. President?
One more question, Senator.
One more, okay. I've got a bunch of them here, Mr. President. I guess I'll do a would you had discussions on Senate Bill 88, which was the standard ground law. We heard some of the very same arguments, that there was going to be a huge increase in violence. People were going to be shooting each other out on the streets. And would you believe that none of that has come to pass?
I believe that that Senate Bill 116 presents a very different context than SB 88, or HB 88, SB 88, SB 88. And so that, I think that would be kind of hearing out as more as to what the threat is.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Carson.
Thank you,
Senator
Senator.
Hosmer, for a question.
Question of Senator Pierce, please.
Senator Pierce?
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Pierce. When the bill was, when comments were made here on the floor today, we heard that SB 116 actually allows, if I'm not mistaken, I think I've got the quote right, it supports a woman's right because it affirms their right to choose to protect herself.
Yes.
How would you address that?
Thank you for the question. With a bit of grit, I believe. I got an email this week from someone I don't know, doesn't live in my district, asking me, how could you possibly hate women so much that you would vote against this bill? And I think it's a bit of a red herring, Senator, because the gun laws in New Hampshire do not treat men and women differently. If they did, if women were treated differently, then I would be the first one to repeal that difference. And I think everybody in this chamber understands that that's true. But it's also a red herring because it distracts us, from with the only issue that is raised by SB 116. That do we or do we not believe that the licensing requirement that's in place helps keep us safe? No one is arguing to impose a license requirement on purchasing a gun, owning a gun, openly carrying a gun concealed while at home, carrying a gun while at your place of business, carrying a gun concealed when the magazine is next to but not in the gun. And no one is arguing to impose any additional requirements like requiring handgun education or training, or imposing a waiting period, or imposing an age restriction on carrying a loaded concealed weapon. All I'm arguing for is some common sense about keeping in place the one safeguard we have against creating situations that increase the chances of a simple confrontation turning into something different. I think the women's argument is a distraction, and frankly, I think it's a bit insulting to intelligent debate on this issue.
Senator Carson.
Question?
Question?
Pierce?
Senator Pierce.
How about you cut her off?
It's hard. Thank you, Senator Pierce. Thank you, Senator Pierce, for taking my question. I'm glad you brought up the issue of women, and I'd like to thank Senator Hosmer for also addressing that issue. And would you believe that during the public hearing, we had testimony from a woman who talked about how she was denied a license to carry concealed because she was a woman, that her father had no problem getting a permit, and her brothers. She was a law-abiding citizen, and her police chief told her she didn't need one.
I don't know the facts of the case. I haven't seen the paperwork in that case. Did she appeal that decision? My God, if she didn't, I'll take the case as an attorney. Because I'll be getting the attorney's fees on that one. But I don't know the particulars of that. We have no way really of determining the veracity of the statements that people who come in off the street can tell us. But she said it, so it has, we have to take it on faith that it's true. But that is not what the law wants to say. And I would love to know the facts behind that case and see the paperwork on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
President.
you. Senator Lasky.
Yes, I didn't know if we were through with the question.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable colleagues, I rise today to urge you to vote no as well on Senate Bill 116, repealing the license requirements for carrying a concealed pistol or revolver. As has been stated, this bill is not just modest changes to the existing law. It is a solution in search of a problem. As stated before, our existing law is a reasonable, common sense approach to carrying a hidden firearm. And overall, New Hampshire is one of the least restrictive states in which to get a permit to carry concealed. Wyoming, Alaska, and Arizona allow some to carry without a permit. Their permits are optional, but the requirements are all stricter than what is proposed in Senate Bill 116. They set a minimum age of 21, require fingerprints and photographs, require proof of proficiency or training, and restrict carrying in places that allow alcoholic beverages to be consumed. Because they are stricter, they are reciprocal with more states than New Hampshire, as has been said. They can qualify, though, for an NICS exemption, unlike the New Hampshire license. As far as domestic violence goes, this bill is not a help to those suffering from domestic violence because it might be just the opposite, that those who with domestic violence assaults could qualify for a license, could qualify to carry a concealed weapon without a license, whereas now there at least be some check to guard from that happening. As far as mental illness goes, there's no way to find out who has been committed to the New Hampshire State Hospital for being dangerous for others due to mental illness. They might qualify and would also be able to carry concealed. Much has been said about the reciprocity with other states. There's a very real possibility that we would lose reciprocity with any state we have an agreement with now if our licensing criteria were reduced. The reciprocity, for example, less restrictive laws seem to be more of a problem with reciprocity with other states than those that are more restrictive. For example, our reciprocity agreement with Pennsylvania since 2004 requires notification to them if we change our concealed firearms statute. Laws on reciprocity often depend upon similarity. Again, Pennsylvania requirements are more stringent with an age requirement and a mandated criminal check. This would not allow for that. So the idea that passing Senate Bill 116 would grant us more reciprocity is not necessarily valid. So with all due respect to my colleagues in Judiciary, I stand with the minority of the Judiciary Committee and ask you to overturn the pass motion, and so we can offer another motion of an expedient to legislate and stand with our New Hampshire chiefs of police and other law enforcement officers to keep New Hampshire a sane, reasonable state in which to carry a firearm. Thank you.
Senator Pierce for a question.
Senator Lasky.
Senator Lasky.
Thank you.
Senator Lasky, you talked about the reciprocity, and I believe it was both Chief Shiguri and Sergeant McCafferty from the state police who testified that because by weakening our laws, as Senate Bill 116 does, that we would likely lose the reciprocity that we currently enjoy, even with the limited number of states that we do currently enjoy. And that's what you just said. But the fallout from that, I think, is what's important to point out. And isn't the fallout from that is that it's like an extreme case that we lose reciprocity with all jurisdictions. I doubt that's going to happen, but we, according to their testimony, we're going to lose it with more. I'm getting to that, Senator. That if we lose reciprocity, that when our citizens go out with the optional license, there are going to be fewer and fewer jurisdictions that they're going to be allowed to go to and carry without, or be able to carry in those states. Is that true?
There is definitely a possibility of that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Sanborn, a question?
Question of Senator Lasky, if I might.
Senator Lasky.
Senator, thank you so much for taking my question today. I truly appreciate it. I first thought maybe to ask the question that if guns make all of us criminals, do pencils make me a bad speller? But my question is more to the point of, I'm trying to understand the minority's position on this. in all honesty. So most of this body understand that I truly treasure traveling up to Senator Woodburn's district. It's an area that truly believes in the Second Amendment. They are fiercely protective of the rights of that. And although we love to go there, some days it can be very, very cold. So if a friend of mine who open carries gets in the car and does the 3.5-hour trek north up to the North Country, gets out of their car and the temperature has fallen, as Senator Woodburn would say, 50 or 60 or 70 degrees, because it's hard living up there in the North Country, and they reach in and put on their jacket, that person has instantly gone from being a law-abiding citizen to being a criminal. And do you believe that's right?
Well, thank you, Senator Stanmore, for the question, but I've been in this legislature, whether in the House or the Senate, for a long time. There are a few things I've carried with me. Primarily, one is to always keep one's word. And the other is that we don't legislate for one case, or one case that has never been proven to be of concern. I honestly think that if we're a police officer to come up to the gentleman or woman that you're talking about, and they said, you know, I inadvertently forgot to put my coat on, that would not be an unreasonable request. I think what we're talking about here is, and I am a staunch defender, and my votes show that as well in the past, of Second Amendment rights. We're not talking about that. We're talking about when times have changed and times require that we take some measures to protect our citizens. Again, the chiefs of police who are at this job, you know, daily to protect us, have all agreed that this would make their job more difficult, could make their job more difficult. And so, listening to them and in not challenging the law, which has been worked for us for almost 100 years, I think that is the prudent way to go, and not look at the far-reaching incidents such as you described.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I came with a long and elegant speech here with lots of wit and wisdom, but I can hear my stomach growling, and I know my colleagues as well, so I'll be a model of brevity and speak against Senate Bill 116. A wise North Country poet once said, "Don't ever take down a fence until you know why it was put up." We're being asked to take down a century-old safeguard that our law enforcement officer says keeps us safe and keeps them safe. SB 116 is a radical and dangerous break from tradition and common sense. Presently, Mr. President, if you want to hide, you gotta abide. And if you want to conceal, you need to reveal. And this means very simple. In straight North Country terms, if you want to conceal your loaded handgun, you have to have a good record. And you have to pass a modest test. Okay? And we're going to do a check. And by all accounts, this is a good and decent law. Now, I had to consult Meldrum Thompson, the great governor of New Hampshire, who gives us tremendous wisdom in his book, right here in front of me, Live Free or Die. And he said, we have a sensible handgun law that leaves the issuance of handgun permits to the discretion of local selectmen or the director of the state police. Seldom has there been an unreasonable denials of the issuing of gun permits, and such rare denials have been corrected when they're brought to the public eye. So this bill would put us to the right of Meldrum Thompson, Mr. President, and the state of Texas. Now, I'm not going to engage in hypothetical banter. I, too, voted against repealing stand your ground because there was no evidence of problems. And that's exactly the same reason why I stand for this common sense law that's been on the books for over 90 years. The process works well. My chiefs support it. I've got more chiefs, I think, in my district. I think I've got more chiefs than Indians in my district. We've got so many chiefs. But I want to recall a story that I had on a patrol with the city of Berlin, their young patrolman. And as he approached the car when he pulled over, he put his hands, right hand, fingerprints on the car. And I asked him why. He said, in case it goes bad. Well, the town of Colebrook, years ago, high school classmate of mine, a trooper, never got a chance to put his fingerprints on that car. We need to support our cops, not allow questionable people to hide guns from them. Now, I asked the proponents, give me evidence. And the evidence that they gave me of abuse in the police department, won't get into the facts, the names, but the basic facts are an application was made and denied. The person had a conviction of reckless operation, charged with a simple assault, domestic dispute, protective order, and also a conviction of a Class A misdemeanor, criminal threatening. And I won't use the exact words, but he said to the police officer while being pulled over for a convicted DWI, "I will kill you." Some say that's First Amendment protected speech. Not where I come from. What soberness conceals, drunkenness reveals. It revealed a poisoned heart, what he said. And I'm glad to say the judge, district court judge from Hooksett, Judge Robert Stevens, some of you may know his father, served in his body, his brother served as our Commissioner of Health and Human Services. And what he said was, this appears to be a pattern of poor judgment which gives cause for concern. Do you think? Is this the best case? This person has a right to own a gun, Mr. President. He has a right to wear it openly. But he does not have a right to hide it and conceal it from others. The Supreme Court stood behind the judge, the police chief, who's here with us, and the town of Hooksett. Mr. President, I ask each member, where do you stand? Whose side are you on? And finally, are you prepared to take down this fence? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Woodburn. Senator Bradley? Senator Phelps, do you have a question?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. Question for Senator Woodburn. Senator Woodburn, there's been a suggestion that the current law offends the Second Amendment to the Constitution. So would you believe that in 2008, the United States Supreme Court, in the Heller decision, opined that this very type of law is within the constitutional boundaries? And would you further believe that the author of that opinion was Justice Antonin Scalia?
Yes.
No, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We've heard a lot of discussion this morning and this afternoon about Senate Bill 116, so let me try to respond to some of the issues that have been brought up. First of all, this bill, Senate Bill 116, changes no law with regard to who is legally entitled to own a firearm, and it changes no law with regard to what legal weapons are in either New Hampshire or this state. It changes no other state laws with regard, or federal laws with regard to why somebody would be disqualified from owning a firearm. Mental health laws doesn't change them. Drug laws doesn't change them. Felony laws doesn't change them. Domestic violence laws doesn't change them. A legal person who is entitled to own a gun, a legal gun, would not be required to have that license to carry concealed. Now, we use this as an example, mightier than the sword. If this were a firearm, the way I'm displaying it, it would be totally legal without any kind of a license in New Hampshire. But if it were like this, I would need a license. So I ask you, what is common sense? I ask you if a piece of paper that gives you that license is going to deter the criminal from criminal behavior. No, in my view, it deters the law-abiding citizen who may need that, as the case that Senator Carson, our good friend from District 14, said, was talked about at the hearing. Let me just finish, because I'm hungry too, by talking about statistics, since statistics have been raised. These tables are the FBI tables. The preeminent data on violent crime. Murder, non-negligent homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault. We're very blessed in New Hampshire to be the 6th safest state in the nation with regard to violent crimes. 199 incidents per every 100,000 people. But our radical and our dangerous neighbor to the west, Vermont, which has allowed concealed carry without a license for 200 years without a problem, is the safest state in the nation, according to these various statistics. And much safer than New Hampshire at 122 violent incidences per every $100,000. If this were so bad for Vermont, with similar geography, similar demographics, how could it be bad for any place else? Other states were cited. Yes, there are 4 other states that more recently than 200 years ago have allowed concealed carry without a license. Wyoming, Montana, Arizona, Alaska. And I looked, these 2 charts represents the FBI statistics from 2010 through 2013, the most available statistics. And quite frankly, when the discussion of concealed carry without a license has arisen in state legislatures around the country, in every one of those states, that violent crime rate has dropped. So I believe that the example is common sense. My good friend and I disagree. What I think that probably all of us should be able to agree about is a criminal who has criminal intent is not going to abide by the current requirement to have a license for concealed carry. The person who will be affected is the law-abiding citizen. We should be on the side of law-abiding citizens. Senate Bill 116 does that.
So I'll ask you a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Bradley, for taking my question. I'm puzzled. In my mind, and maybe it's kind of female mind, but at any rate, I'm wondering why it is more dangerous for me to see your pencil or your gun than it is for, I would be in less danger, not to be able to see it if it's concealed or hidden.
I think most Americans, certainly myself, would prefer to see people as people and not see them carrying firearms. I don't think it's any more dangerous one way or the other. A criminal is going to act as a criminal would act, and this is not going to deter criminal behavior, in my view.
Senator Pierce?
Yes.
There's a question of Senator Bradley.
So the license requirement doesn't deter criminals or criminal behavior. So is it your position that we should repeal laws that criminals violate?
I'm not sure how to respond to that question, except I'll respond to it exactly by what the bill does. Again, in case you missed what I said previously, it only obviates the need for a law-abiding citizen legally entitled to own a weapon that's a legal weapon from having that third step of having to have a license for concealed carry. It does not change any other law, state or federal, nor should it.
Paul? I guess maybe...
You must not be very hungry.
Actually not. Maybe I misunderstood that, because when you were talking about, you're saying criminals, the law is not going to deter criminals. Were you talking about the license requirement, or what part of the law, as it stands today, is not?
The requirement to have a license for concealed carry, in my opinion, is not likely to deter criminals from carrying out criminal activity.
Okay, that's what I thought you meant. And so, can it really be good public policy to say that because the criminal breaks the law, we should therefore repeal it? I honestly don't see the logic in that.
Well, Senator, the logic is this. We're on the side of law-abiding citizens that should be able to protect their lives, their liberties, and their loved ones through an act of self-defense without having that additional step of a license requirement for concealed carry. We may disagree about the efficacy of that, but that's how I see it.
Any last follow-up?
Further question?
To the speech. You again went back to Vermont as the first safest, New Hampshire the sixth safest in terms of violent crimes per 100,000. You cited FBI statistics about the murder rate. I brought up the statistics from the Centers for Disease Control talking about gun, what was the term used? I apologize. Gun death per capita or something like that. The Vermont had the 19th highest per capita gun death rate in the country, whereas New Hampshire is in the lowest 10. So, I mean, I accept your statistics that the murder rate may be lower in Vermont, or the violent crimes per 100,000 is lower in Vermont. But the CDC says that Vermont is in the top quartile states for violent gun deaths. And since we're talking about gun issues here, shouldn't we be limiting our discussion to that rather than doing a death or homicide that could occur by any means?
I think the gold standard in statistics are the FBI crime rates, number one. And number two, I'm not sure that suicides aren't included in that Vermont study. It would cast a totally different light on us in the statistics you cite. So, thank you.
Thank you, Senators. Question is the adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 116 FM. You ready for the question? Roll call. Roll call has been requested and seconded by Senator Carson. If you're in favor of Senate Bill 116 FN, you're going to say aye. If you're opposed, you're going to say no. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Whitburn.
No.
Senator Forrester.
Yes.
Senator Bradley.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
No.
Senator Pierce.
No.
Senator Cataldo.
Yes.
Senator Hosmer.
No.
Senator Little.
Yes.
Senator Sanborn.
Yes.
Senator Kelly.
No.
Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator Abard.
Yes.
Senator Lasky.
No.
Senator Carson.
Yes.
Senator Feltes.
No.
Senator Booton.
Yes.
Senator Reagan.
Yes.
Senator Susie.
No.
Senator Birdsell.
Yes.
Senator Full Clark.
No.
Senator Prescott.
Yes.
Senator Stiles.
Yes.
Senator Morse.
Yes. The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass is adopted 14-9 and it's ordered to third reading. The Senate.
Interesting day. We got to watch a carefully stage-managed and choreographed, nonsensical discussion of common sense and the fact that a concealed carry license makes people violent road rage offenders. It was quite enlightening, but probably worse than anything, I think in an unguarded moment, Senator David Pierce stated that when he was questioned about people coming in to testify and talking about women, that, well, you know, we can't necessarily trust the veracity of those who come in off the street to testify. So, aside from the fact that they hate guns, aside from the fact that they hate guns in the hands of people they don't like, they don't even trust the average citizen to come in and testify and be truthful. I think that's quite an indictment and I'm very disappointed. All of that being said, we had a vote of 14-9, ought to pass. Not one Democrat voted for the bill. Not one.